Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment released last week, a prequel to Tears of the Kingdom set during the imprisoning war that Zelda time travels back to. Unlike Age of Calamity, which told an alternate version of the Great Calamity, Age of Imprisonment's story is canon. It closely follows the actual events of the imprisoning war, providing more context for Tears of the Kingdom's events. Even though this means most people will already know the broader strokes of Age of Imprisonment's story going in, spoiler alert, it ends with Rauru imprisoning Ganondorf, its story is still extremely valuable. Not only is it just really cool, it also has a bunch of fascinating revelations about the history of this Kingdom of Hyrule. Today, I'm joined by my good friend Monster Maze to discuss this game's lore. So, before we get stuck into the lore, what were your overall thoughts on the game?
I was genuinely surprised. As someone who read Masterworks, or at least most of it, the Japanese version, with Google Translate mostly and some fan translations, I'm really surprised how closely they followed the stuff they established in there, which was not the case with Age of Calamity all that much. Like how the story of how Link got the Master Sword really deviated from what they established in the book compared to in the game, where, you know, like in the book it says he got it like when he was really, really young, like pre-teen.
Yeah.
And then in the actual game he gets it when he's already at the same age, basically, like 17 or however old he is. I think he's 17, right?
I think he's meant to be 17.
Yeah,
in the Korok Forest with Astor.
Yeah, it just so many things were different. And here, like, I did a video about the Great Calamity, or I also did a video about the Great Calamity, but also about the imprisoning war. And for that one, I really had to dive into Masterworks a lot, just to get all the little, like, how the war progressed. And obviously, I had to do a lot of speculation here and there, but yeah, I was really surprised, like, how they followed it up, like even little details like how they went back to the Great Plateau to try to recapture the castle. That was in there too, and how they sought refuge in Tanagar Canyon in the Forgotten Temple. All of that was present, so I was really, really surprised just how closely they followed the book for a change. And
I agree, and it was interesting how going in, we knew the overall story, which is, you know, very unusual for a game that I know I was playing mostly for the story, and I assume you're quite similar in that regard. That we already knew the broader strokes of the very thing that we're going into the game to experience. But still, even though that they had to work with these really tight constraints of this established narrative, it still just came across so well. It was just so satisfying to see it all displayed properly, not in these broken fragments.
Yeah, because obviously in Age of Calamity they kind of had the opportunity to just disconnect themselves altogether, because it was like a different timeline, like an alternate reality, so they didn't have to follow everything they wanted to follow or had to follow according to the book, because it was basically a what-if scenario. Whereas here, they made it clear from the very get-go, it's canon, it's going to be a canon retelling of the imprisoning war. So they, like you said, they did have certain restraints, like what they could or could not do, like simple things like certain characters. How do you explain those people never being mentioned in the future? Which is, we'll get into that when we get to the actual lore itself. But yeah, I mean, I think the cinematics were probably one of the best in the entire series. Just
phenomenal.
Like actual goosebumps at multiple moments, even a little tear here and there, like especially near the ending. It was just really well done. Yeah. The characters were very likable, the way they interacted with each other. Even little things like you had certain Rito that had like this really distinct personality, even though they don't really play a big role. You had that... one of the Rito he's got like a deerstalker cap on, like you know that, like one of those Russian hats, like for the cold.
Yeah,
like even little characters like that, their voice acting was really good, and normally it was kind of especially in the mainline games, in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, like small characters that don't really matter. Either they don't speak at all, or they speak like one sentence and it's nothing noticeable. But here, I really felt like pretty much every character was fleshed out to a certain degree, where I actually liked everyone on screen.
I agree, and I think in some ways they kind of had to do it that way, in that, like we said, they had to follow this existing narrative. So the only way they can really add to that is by fleshing it out, kind of areas that believably would have been part of the story, like this Rito character that we weren't aware of before, or there's all the new Hylians like Typhon and Kino, whatever his name is.
I don't know how to pronounce it.
Yeah, they kind of had to flesh out, like pad out the existing story, which I just think it worked really well.
Yeah.
And I know for us, especially, who kind of dig really, into the lore of these games, the fact that this is just the imprisoning war, it's not an alternate timeline imprisoning war, just makes the whole game so valuable, in that the questions it answers and things the way the story goes now enhances Tears of the Kingdom in a way that Age of Calamity, even though its story is still really enjoyable to play through, it's still a lot of fun. The fact that it was an alternate timeline means when you play Breath of the Wild, you're not thinking so much, oh, that's this from Age of Calamity, that this mystery is something that Age of Calamity answers. Whereas I know the next time I go and play Tears of the Kingdom, there'll be moments where I think, oh, that calls back to something I remember from Age of Imprisonment. It really, the games will kind of support each other in a way that we just didn't have with Age of Calamity.
I think overall, Age of Calamity felt very inconsequential compared to this. With this one, I do actually feel like what I was watching mattered, and it, like you said, it enriches Tears of the Kingdom, which I do think was necessary, because Tears of the Kingdom did lack a lot of, especially when it comes to the ancient past narrative, it just lacked so much depth. Like, you didn't really I didn't even really get the impression that Zelda lived among these people for so long, because like the way the memories are structured and how little there are, they just didn't show much of it. So as Link, you don't really get the impression like that Zelda had this whole life that she lived, and it felt more like, for at least from our perspective as the main protagonist, it just kind of felt like, oh, she disappeared into the past, and we don't really know what happened. And at the end, we still don't really know, because literally the ending is like, oh, I have so much to tell you, and then cut to credits.
Yes. I saw Hyrule as it was, and it's like, yeah, tell us. But I think, I've always said this, that Breath of the Wild obviously had its story structured in the same way, in that the actual kind of meat of the story is through the memories that you pick up of Link. And again, they're only short cutscenes, they're out of order, but Breath of the Wild's memories work far better just because you're exploring the ruins of this kingdom of Hyrule, whereas Tears of the Kingdom is set in the same world as Breath of the Wild, with little extra bits that don't really, like the depths and the Sky Islands, that don't really enhance the story of Rauru's Hyrule and Zelda's journey in the distant past, as well as the world did in Breath of the Wild. So it always felt like we were even more disconnected from the actual narrative in Tears of the Kingdom than we were in Breath of the Wild, which means Age of Imprisonment is, in a way, is kind of even more valuable than a canon Great Calamity game would be. And especially for me, it is the kind of lore mysteries that the Age of Imprisonment answers, I guess, that I just find so fascinating. Like, one of the things I was most excited for regarding this game was information on the Zonai, of course. From Tears of the Kingdom and Masterworks, we know that the Zonai existed in the distant past. They were the ones to build the structures like the Fire Temple and the Stormwind Ark and mining operations in the depths, that sort of thing. We know they then ascended to the heavens for an indeterminate amount of time before they returned to the surface, and eventually one of them, Rauru, founds Hyrule along with Sonia. But by the time of the founding, and I think it's only in Tears of the Kingdom, it's only really mentioned by a throwaway line, or seemingly throwaway line from Ganondorf, that Rauru and Minoru are the only remaining Zonai.
Yes.
So something happened to the rest of the tribe, and we're never told what it is in Tears of the Kingdom. And I know Masterworks kind of throws some ideas around.
Yeah, it presents like four different options. They say like maybe it was some sort of inner war, like a Zonai civil war, or maybe it was a natural disaster or a disease or some sort of genetic degraded, like their genetics just didn't work out or whatever, like they couldn't reproduce in some way.
And yeah, we get an answer for that in Age of Imprisonment, which is something that I didn't really expect them to cover. I kind of thought that would remain a mystery, like you say, in Masterworks, where they kind of give a few different explanations, and especially with the kind of the role the Zonai play in the story, where they're these kind of godlike, almost, well, they are mythical, I suppose, beings that they're kind of similar. They feel similar in many ways to kind of Tolkien's elves, that they're kind of this race that are elevated above mortals, and they're dying out because of, you know, various reasons, in that, you know, kind of the old magic is dying sort of trope.
Yeah, it's a good comparison.
It's nice to have a concrete answer. And we have a concrete answer, which is that they kind of had their own great calamity in a way, in that machines they designed themselves turned on them.
Yeah.
So obviously one of the most discussed elements of Age of Imprisonment before release was this mysterious construct that seems to resemble Link, and Fi's theme plays as it activates, that we saw in the trailers. And essentially it's revealed that these constructs are weapons created by the ancient Zonai, and whereas other constructs like the stewards and the ranger constructs, soldier constructs, whatever, while they do kind of act autonomously, the difference seems to be that this newly revealed class of construct has some kind of free will or agency, as well as just being more dangerous overall. And it's not really explained how, but we know that I think that Minoru just says they went berserk in her little explanation, and that led to the fall of the Zonai. So what do you think about this revelation?
Very unexpected, yeah, very unexpected. I also did not expect them to provide any answers, because it wasn't really the biggest question people had about the Zonai, to be honest. Like my at least not for me. I shouldn't speak for everyone, but like most people were more interested in like the Zonai and maybe their relationship to the Triforce, or like the buildings that they had, the magic that they possessed, all that kind of stuff. I didn't even realize that, because I think there's a little bit of a translation difference between the English and the Japanese version, whereas, because I always got the impression that the Zonai just left, that they just decided to go somewhere else or whatever. And I think it wasn't until at least a few months after Tears of the Kingdom came out that someone told me, well, they do actually say that they died out, so they went extinct.
Oh, interesting.
Because
there's the only line we had in Tears of the Kingdom really was Ganondorf saying that the noble Zonai no longer grace this world with their presence, which
it was left very ambiguous. So I just didn't get the impression that there was some kind of big mystery behind it. I thought, well, they just left, or they mingled with the surface dwellers, and at some point most of them just died out because either they couldn't reproduce or whatever, genetics. Like that was never. But that's why I was so surprised that the game actually makes a point to explore that part and specifically say, like, this was the downfall of the Zonai, their own technology, these kind of like super soldiers that they created with their own technology, which are obviously very, very, like you would say, because that was one of my first questions was, well, didn't they build lots of constructs? Like, why didn't those turn on them? But the normal constructs do seem like a little bit more simple in their design, not just in terms of what they can do physically, but also like, I think you already gave a good example when we first called about the game, where you told me that part where on the Great Sky Island, they just mindlessly keep repeating their daily routines, even though there's no one to serve anymore.
Yeah, we get Rauru's spirit. He says, we originally created the constructs to assist in our endeavors. I never imagined they would continue to carry out their assigned tasks to this day. And he says, the fact their labor no longer serves any purpose, yet they perform it still, is disquieting to me. So it's kind of, they are just essentially, stuck on autopilot. They just kind of do whatever they've been programmed to do and continue to do it. And I suppose that would be, in Tears of the Kingdom specifically, that would be an explanation for why Flux constructs and Soldier constructs attack Link, because they're stationed in these positions around the world, and they've got the kind of defense protocol mode on or something.
Yeah, it's basically a security system almost. They even have a little alarm going off when they see you.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much. Yeah.
So clearly, like, mentally they're not on the same level as what they were. Like, they're only maybe one step above the Guardians.
Yes. Yeah.
In terms of they are autonomous, but they almost maybe purposely kept simple-minded in a way, where they...
Yeah, because you can talk to... there's certain steward constructs that know Link by name. For example, the ones on... Courage, Valor, Bravery Islands. They say, "Oh, hello, Master Link. Your record time for this diving challenge is however many seconds." So there's clearly some sort of mental capacity that they've got there. But I think the way to think about it is that they have their set roles. They're kind of on, like AI on guardrails. They're kind of like that. Whereas the constructs from that led to the fall of the Zonai, I suppose, would be an example of kind of agentic AI that can kind of, make its own decisions and kind of breaks free of the control of the Zonai. Because it's a little bit mysterious how these constructs led to the fall of the Zonai, right? Because of course the most important the construct that we see in the game is the Knight construct, which we'll talk more about him in detail later on. But he's an example of one of these constructs with a shard of the Master Sword, which gives him some sort of sacred duties, whereas the Forbidden construct is the same thing but with gloom, which makes him focus on destruction. But we don't really know what one of these constructs that didn't have this, incredibly sacred power or incredibly evil power, in their core. We don't see an example of what they'd be like. So it's difficult to kind of imagine how they would have functioned normally, and also what would have led to them, as Minoru says, going berserk.
Yeah, like, did they cram a secret stone inside their core, or did they... Obviously, it was some sort of... It was obviously some sort of science experiment taken a little too far, where they tried to create these constructs that were just way above what they normally had as constructs, for whatever purpose, I don't know. Maybe the part in the book where they speak about a Zonai civil war, maybe there is a nugget of truth in there as well. It could be that these were being built to... Who's to say, like, maybe not all Zonai got along with each other, and at some point they started infighting, and one of these factions started developing these, so they were made for conflict, for war, basically. That is a possibility.
That's a really good point, because we get just after Rauru and Minoru discuss the cores of the two constructs we see in Age of Imprisonment, Rauru remembers the Forbidden construct, and he says that he picked up on the same I can't remember the wording, but the same dark magic that he felt from Ganondorf was emanating from this construct. And then there's a strange line where he says, perhaps our ancestors had more to do with their own downfall than we previously thought. It's interesting that they've given us a concrete answer, but it's still quite mysterious.
I think if they actually showed a flashback of the Zonai destroying themselves or whatever, like a bit like the Great Calamity flashback in Breath of the Wild, I think it would have... I don't think that would have added much. I think the mystery is the fact that even Rauru doesn't know what happened to his people. So by the time he and, I don't know, however many Zonai came down to Earth with him at that time, like these people, when they came down to the surface, there can't have been that many of them left at that point. And maybe Rauru was super young at the time, so he doesn't remember, or maybe he was even born on the surface. Who knows? They don't really explain that part, but I think that's part of the mystery, and we don't always have to know everything about a certain group of people. Sometimes it's more fun to speculate about that.
Yeah, I agree. And it might sound hypocritical for like someone like myself who's, posted so many videos about the Zonai and, trying to answer all these mysteries, but I agree that sometimes the mystery is better. And even though we have got this answer, I think it's as satisfying as it is that, if they, it spelled out exactly how it happened. Is like Rauru's, my grandfather, Bauru created this construct and went to war with his uncle. I don't know. We don't need to know that. I think the Zonai are the mystery surrounding them. It still exists now. They haven't revealed too much that's taken away from the magic of this people, and I think I'm really happy with just this little tiny tidbit of lore that kind of suggests how they fell, but doesn't really spell it out.
Yeah, and it's a classic story when you think about it. A creator being wiped out by its own creation, like Frankenstein, all that kind of stuff. I like that. I like that they put that spin on it when it comes to that disappearance, because it also makes them seem less perfect. Because at first I always thought, like when Tears of the Kingdom just came out and I rolled credits on it, I kind of got a feeling like the Zonai were a little bit bland. They were these super advanced spiritual beings and they could do no wrong, and now we kind of learned that no, they were just like the Hylians in many ways. They also had their flaws, and they were put in charge of the secret stones and all that, and apparently they did have some sort of connection to Hylia, but they're still just mortal beings, albeit very advanced ones compared to everyone else at the time. But they did have their own inner struggles and flaws, and you can even see that with Rauru. Like, he's not some benevolent guy. He also makes mistakes, and he gets frustrated, he gets impatient, he overestimates or underestimates people, especially Ganondorf. In the case of Ganondorf, he really screwed up with that one.
Yeah, well, Ganondorf, he says it's the price of Rauru's arrogance that really gets him, and I think that's partially coming from Ganondorf's. I think Ganondorf is quite jealous and envious of the power Rauru has at the start. Yeah. But we can tell later on in the game that Ganondorf's comments really kind of get to Rauru, and they make him second guess his actions. Just before he gives the secret stones out to the sages, he kind of wonders, about questions almost his right to wield the power of the secret stones and to give them out and everything like that. Which, I think it really goes a long way to humanize him, because again, it's probably just an issue of Tears of the Kingdom only giving us such a limited view of this time period and these characters, but Rauru, he didn't have as much depth as I'd have liked him to. as opposed to, because I've got a soft spot for kings of Hyrule as characters. I just love them, and Rauru is one of my favorites, especially now after Age of Imprisonment. But I think compared to King Rome, for example, he's such a complex character in that he makes these difficult decisions, and in many ways they're the wrong decisions. How he treats Zelda, in many ways, it is a big cause for what happens to his kingdom. But you read his journal, and there is kind of you can feel his internal struggle, and you get the feeling that it all comes from a very human place, and he's trying to balance his love for his daughter with his responsibility as a king, and it just feels so human, that conflict. And that's something that I felt we didn't really see from Rauru in Tears of the Kingdom.
No.
But that's definitely been expanded on in this game.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I mean, we might as well segue into Rauru in general and his Kingdom of Hyrule, because that was another thing that I was dying to see in this game. I kind of did think from the trailers that we'd get more of a chance to explore this. It did kind of seem like it was hinting that there'd perhaps be a hub world. I think you might know, I can't remember the name of there was a Hyrule Warriors game, a Dynasty Warriors game based on Fire Emblem recently. That had a kind of hub.
There's
world.
many of them. There's like Persona Warriors, and practically every.
And that has like a central hub area, does it as well?
I'm convinced that pretty much every big franchise is gonna get a Warriors spin-off at some point if they keep going.
See, yeah.
Koei Tecmo just keeps cranking them out like crazy.
Yeah. But still, even the limited glimpses we got in this of Rauru's kingdom before Ganondorf redecorates, I suppose I'll say. I thought it was cool to see little glimpses, although I did feel that I wanted to see a bit more.
I agree. Yeah.
But perhaps just maybe not a full hub of the Great Plateau, but I'd have liked to see more of not just Rauru's Hyrule Castle, but especially the Temple of Time and how look, the geography of the Great Plateau in that time is really interesting to me, because it's still a little bit of a mystery how that connects to the Great Sky Island we see in Tears of the Kingdom, which Rauru's spirit says in that game that was the Garden of Time, so that was the area that surrounds the Temple of Time in Rauru's time. But it doesn't quite seem to line up very well.
No, there's too much land, basically.
Exactly, it's a bit strange. But what do you think of this era's Hyrule?
Well, I do agree with you that I would have it felt a little bit video gamey, where it's like all these just separate levels instead of one interconnected world, which I guess is part of the Musou game type of experience. But a hub world on either the castle or a big part of the plateau would have been cool. But overall, I do think that they put just little details in there that I did like how those dragon trees, I think you call them, they have growth on them. They actually still...
Oh, in the Ceres Scablands, yeah.
Yeah, and just in general, I do... there were a few places that I felt I would have loved to see the Zonai ruins. Just, I wanted to... There was not I don't think there's a single mission in that province, right? In Faron?
There is... I'm certain there was a Faron mission.
Maybe I didn't do all the side quests, so maybe I missed it.
It might have been a side quest. I don't think there was a main. There definitely wasn't a main quest there. But yeah, there was. I'm sure there was a side quest there, and I think you can see some of the kind of the snake head statues. I don't. Maybe again, it's difficult to kind of get your bearings sometimes in Age of Imprisonment, especially, I know you'll be the same, you're constantly trying to think, where am I in the world of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom? And I was trying to do that in that one.
I'm still not sure how all that connects, the original Zonai ruins, and because you would have expected that was the original kingdom's capital, like the Zonai Kingdom capital. But maybe that's from the Zonai time, like long before Rauru even. Who knows?
Well, that's it. It's the Zonai history is strange in that they kind of keep leapfrogging from the sky to the surface. We know they started on the surface, then they went to the sky.
Yes.
Then they went down to the surface, and then there's the Kingdom of Hyrule. And then we know that after the Imprisoning War, at least some islands were raised into the sky, like the ancient stone tablets, which is something we also should cover, and the Great Sky Island were raised as well. So there's kind of a up down history to the Zonai.
Yeah, and all the while they also kept mining in the depths.
Yeah,
that entrance that they found, I think in Farron, Tobio's Hollow, the entrance to the construct.
Yes,
factory.
that's kind of just north of the Spring of Courage, kind of between that and Necluda, like Black Tree Plain sort of place. It's like I said, it's difficult to line things up, especially because I quite liked one little detail that I loved to see was we already knew from Tears of the Kingdom that Hyrule in this era was much more flooded. We see that little map in the Forgotten Temple in Tears of the Kingdom, and we can see there's much larger bodies of water, including kind of central Hyrule. Hyrule Field is almost completely underwater, it seems, which is really interesting. And we do see examples of that in Age of Imprisonment. Like I noticed that the gate to the Great Plateau leads out onto a bridge, kind of over a big moat. Which is really interesting.
Yes, well, you see it on the overworld map of the game as well. You can see way more water, which, by the way, that's also one thing I wanted to bring up from before. When I did my video about the Imprisoning War, I said technically the Zora should not be living in the same place yet. Like Zora's domain we know from Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild. In the books, it said that they established that domain, that specific Zora's domain, was established like sometime after the calamity of 10,000 years ago, I believe.
Yeah.
So in my video, I even said like I'm a bit skeptical. Like I'm a bit skeptical that they will actually remember that they wrote that. But they actually did.
Yeah, they're based in
the
wetlands, right? In Age of Imprisonment.
Yeah, they're now in the wetlands.
Yeah.
I would have put my money on Lake Hylia. I think I even made that argument. Like, it's probably going to be Lake Hylia.
That would have been nice, actually. What did you think about the little glimpses we saw at the actual shrines, the Shrines of Light, and their kind of general purpose? Because it's nothing really that we didn't know, except there's one element of it that we didn't know before. Because previously we knew that Rauru and Sonia embarked on this pilgrimage of light, where they kind of went across Hyrule and defeated these previously unspecified evils and placed the shrines where they were defeated to kind of prevent them resurrecting. And in some way, the shrines seem to purify whatever dark magic or gloom or what have you is left, and that's why you see the spiral of light, much like when Rauru seals Ganondorf. But in Age of Imprisonment, it's revealed that these evils are something called shades, which we hadn't seen before. What did you think about those?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know what to make of them, except that when you kill them, they turn into Poe spirits. All of them, always.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Clearly, there's like a spiritual thing to it, like they're like corrupted souls or something. But I think it's more or less tied to the whole idea of evil will always exist, probably due to because I think the word being used for gloom and malice and all that stuff is similar to the like Demise's curse.
Right.
Like the terminology is similar or even just the same. I would have to look that up again to make sure that I'm not talking out of my ass. But I'm pretty sure it's tied to the same idea.
Right. Because there's
But to actually to actually see them, the shades, it does show that this force, this gloomy malice-like force, already exists independent of Ganondorf.
Yeah.
So it's more something that he uses or taps into. It's not like he created the whole grudge, gloom, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, well, obviously we know Rauru and Sonia are aware of them before Ganondorf is even really on the scene. But we know that Calamo talks about them as well, but just at the very start of the game when he and the Night Construct go and help out Ardi's Gerudo, he says something along the lines of that they show up when the land's not doing so hot or something like that. It's kind of the implication is that when Hyrule's in a bad state or whatever, or maybe there's less order in the world, you get more of these kind of malignant spirits appearing, which is a really interesting concept, and it does make sense.
And I also like that. That's actually when I already knew that the game was like that. That was my first hint that the game was going to be good, because the fact that they actually show, that's one of the first things they show, that like, oh yeah, this shrine is still under construction, and then they finish it. Because that, first of all, it's just cool to see that that's a thing that was still happening even when Zelda arrived, know? Because I got the impression that they placed all these shrines like long before Rauru ever even became the King of Hyrule. But even after he's already the King of Hyrule, they're still busy cleaning up the land in a way, which
I thought was really
nice. And they're still constructing these shrines.
I thought it was interesting how like the actual mechanism of them finishing the shrine, because we obviously see Rauru and Sonia put their hands together in the exact same pose we see on the statue in the shrines, which is really great. And obviously we know that Rauru has light powers, which will be, I assume he's doing the majority of the labor in sealing these shrines. But then Zelda says something along the lines of, oh, that must be tiring for you. And he says, not like it used to be. And then mentions that now he has Sonia. And it seems like it read to me that it seemed like Rauru was doing this before Sonia. He was, defeating shades and creating shrines. But then he mentions that now he's got Sonia, his seals can last for a lot longer. So to me, that sounds like Rauru uses his light powers to, actually banish the shades and create the seal or whatever. But then you've got Sonia's, obviously, time power, kind of lengthening that seal and allowing them to last for much longer. I assume that's how that was meant to be read.
I think so, yeah.
Which is cool, because then it's always been a little bit unclear how Sonia would have tied into that, because obviously she's not really shown to have a particular a power of light in the same way that Rauru and Zelda do. So how does time help with creating shrines or whatever? But yeah, that's a good explanation for it, that it helps Rauru's magic last longer, which I thought was just really neat.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's also an element of like, maybe she's sharing her own life force with him to amplify his magic in a way. Yeah,
in much the same way that Rauru, Sonia and Zelda do during the Great Plateau attack, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Because I don't really see how time plays into that. He's just firing off a Kamehameha beam towards the Molduga. So yeah, I'm sure there's also some of that in there, which makes sense. That's been a theme in Zelda in general, where certain characters who are very powerful, they can either share their life force or they can transfer it to someone else, like how Zelda transfers her life force to Midna to save her in Twilight Princess.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's more examples. In general, like Vati, for example, always wanted to steal Zelda's light force or life force, whatever you want to call it. Skyward Sword, similar.
Yeah, I suppose in Breath of the Wild, you have the Sheikah monks who kind of seem to give the very last of their spirit. Coalesce into these orbs and then they fade away, and Link can use their power to kind of gain blessing from Hylia. So yeah, there's definitely a precedent for that sort of thing.
It's very Dragon Ball Z-esque, where you can like share your key.
Spirit bomb, sort of. Others. Yeah.
Yeah, spirit bomb, or when they give each other energy to heal each other, that kind of stuff. Yeah. So it's like I said, it's like key energy or whatever, and you can transfer it. So I think that's probably what's happening there.
Yeah.
That just you have two powerful entities who also happen to have the secret stone to amplify that magic even further.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, with two people, it's always going to be easier. Which is still kind of why it's so insane how Zelda manages to seal Calamity Ganon all by herself.
Yeah,
whereas,
it's
like
pretty
in the
impressive. I mean, of course, we can assume that Ganondorf is much more powerful than Calamity Ganon, and there's the line from Sonia in Age of Imprisonment where she says, you're stronger than I am, and you might be stronger than Rauru is, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, because she has the combination of both of their powers.
Yeah.
So I guess that makes sense that she would be more powerful. Plus, we still don't know exactly what's going on with that Triforce on the back of her hand. Like there has to be something to that as well. So maybe that would explain why she's so incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I didn't
maybe
see the Triforce specifically in Age of Imprisonment, but when she picks up, just before, Rauru throws her his dagger that she then uses as her weapon for the game. Her kind of light power emanates from her hand, right? It's from her right hand again.
Yeah.
Which is obviously where the Triforce symbol shows up in Breath of the Wild. And later on, there's a moment when Zelda's talking to Rauru, and she's kind of just holding her right hand in her left, kind of like, wringing it, and kind of, I don't know, they didn't show the Triforce symbol unless I missed it. But again, I think there is kind of,
unless you count Sonia's tattoos or body paint.
Yeah. But I didn't see it with Zelda's powers, which I think they're kind of still hinting to it, but they don't want to kind of to make the make the connection, concrete.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to get an answer to that. No. I think that's going to remain like, maybe she has the full Triforce or whatever. Or
well, because you had the theory that in much the same way that the Minish Cap's Zelda has this kind of light force in her bloodline that Vati obviously wants to extract, yes. I guess. You posted a theory, a year or so ago about Zelda and the Triforce and how that there could be a similar mechanism working there, right?
Yeah, because like in Skyward Sword, it's very much implied that Link has the full Triforce from the very beginning, from the very start. Mm-hmm. And obviously we know that pieces of the Triforce can be handed down from one person to the next, as evident from the way that the Hero of Twilight inherits the
of course, yeah,
the Triforce of Courage from the Hero of Time. But we didn't know for sure if that was also possible with the full Triforce. And in that video, I kind of made the argument like, well, maybe it could definitely be. I don't see why it wouldn't be possible. Like, mm-hmm. if a person is powerful enough to contain or to control that power, then I don't see why not. And it would explain why the Triforce has been missing for so long. And it's basically become like it used to be the most recognizable, most important object in the entire universe, and all of a sudden nobody remembers or talks about it in this era, at least.
Yeah.
So clearly something happened to it, causing it to no longer be around. So my idea was maybe it's being passed down through Zelda's bloodline. How that happened or why, I have no idea. And how that ties into Rauru and Sonia, also no idea. But neither Rauru or Sonia ever shows the Triforce on their palm or on their hand or anywhere else. Though I guess Rauru does make like a triangle shape when he does his beam.
Yeah, obviously he does his kind of Tien Shinhan triangle thing when he fires it, and also when the beam kind of like the frame before it blasts out, you do see kind of a golden triangle shape in the light. So again, and obviously, you mentioned Sonia's tattoos, but all of the ancient Zonai stuff has got triangle symbolism, all throughout it. All their tunics and whatever have these lots of triangles, kind of, which obviously make lots of Triforce shapes in the pattern. So they're kind of, there's lots of hints to it, but it's it seems like it's even more forgotten than it was in the time of Echoes of Wisdom, where obviously it was still a thing, and people, especially the royal family, were still aware of it, but even the name had been forgotten.
They just referred to it as something else. The name Triforce had been forgotten by that point, at least for a little while.
What they call it in Echoes of Wisdom.
The primeval force,
prime
or
energy,
something?
prime energy,
yeah. So that it's still a thing that people are aware of. That there's this object that emanates this huge amount of energy, and it's basically what holds the universe together.
Exactly. But speaking of sacred things that Hylians once used to worship, what do you make of the sacred beasts comment? Because for those who aren't who may be mystics, it's such a throwaway line. When Rauru gives Agreston his they call it an envoy mask, but the kind of Zonai sage mask that we saw him wearing in Tears of the Kingdom, I believe Sonia mentions that they've been fashioned to resemble one of the sacred beasts long worshipped by Hylians. And that's about the only mention we get of that, which is very strange. What did you make of that?
Well, obviously we always had like certain imagery that like resemble the divine beasts. Like
as
in
like the temples themselves are designed around the animals, yeah.
Yeah, they were obviously built long before the events of 10,000 years ago when they constructed the divine beast. So clearly they were based on something pre-existing, but now we know that those things were also inspired by something pre-existing. So I guess the best explanation would be that there may have been these giant creatures who lived in Hyrule, a bit similar to like other past giant deities like what is his name again? Levius in Skyward Sword, the giant whale.
I never know if it's Levius or Levius, but yeah, that guy. Of course, the light spirits from Twilight Princess come to mind, and there's 4 of them, and they're all they're giant animals. There's a snake, a goat, a monkey, and
they're not as giant. They're not like. But we don't know if the divine beasts were built to the same scale as these giant beings actually were, or if they've been blown up to a much bigger size. But obviously Zelda has always featured like these big spiritual beings, these like demigods or deities, whatever you want to call them. It's a bit weird because they don't really follow the same rules, because obviously they're not like gods. But they do call them deities because they are revered. Yeah,
I suppose it's kind of like, kami, like kind of very Shinto.
Yeah.
Gods, I think, is the closest translation of kami. I know someone in the comments will tell me if I'm wrong on that. But I suppose in kind of from like our Western perspective, we think of gods as like, omnipotent and omniscient and all those things, whereas kami don't have to be that. They're kind of more...
they can die.
Guardian spirits, that kind of things. They can die, things like that, So I think that's kind of more what we're going to see there. But it is interesting that, like you said, we thought that perhaps the sages, the ancient sages, were the inspiration for the Sheikah divine beasts, which obviously they take the same shapes as these sacred beasts. But now we know that there's kind of another layer to it, so it goes even further back.
Now that we're talking about that, I literally just thought of something that might be relevant. Maybe not. But apparently, there was like a time when Hyrule was much more tumultuous. Like the overall climate was much more unstable. There was a lot of like natural disasters and maybe other stuff going on. And then at some point they built all these temples to, like, I think they're just basically giant shrines that suppress this whatever is causing these disasters. At least that's how they describe it in Masterworks. I'm sure each one of them had its own story to it.
Yeah. In the same way that we know the Stormwind Arc was kind of gifted to the Rito, That's kind of one of the it's expanded on best in Tears of the Kingdom, where you get the legend of the Stormwind Arc. And
Also, by the way, can I just say I love that they actually use it in the.
So cool.
It's so cool. I did not expect that at all.
Use it like a kind of actual battleship.
Like a battleship,
Yeah. No, I thought that was fantastic. But yeah, we know that was gifted to them by one of the Zonai pre-Hyrule, kind of in a time when I think it was that the winds stopped blowing rather than they kind of blew too much, I suppose. And I think that the kind of idea is the oars of the Stormwind Arc would kind of move the wind around and enable the Rito to fly again. So you're right, all 4 of the temples have some sort of connection to they kind of solve an environmental issue related to their element.
That's exactly how and they all have the imagery of those beasts too. So I don't know, for some reason
you think perhaps the temples became
like
the objects of worship.
Like they became replacements for, like, maybe these ancient the same way the light spirits kept their respective province in check, and if you kill them or whatever, then the whole place falls apart or starts to decline. I think the dragons serve.
I see what you're getting at. So the kind of idea would be you had these sacred beasts long ago that then vanished or were killed or for some reason were indisposed. Then you got this tumultuous period that the Zonai then fix by creating the temples.
The temples are like replacements for whatever these beasts were doing to keep. Because I don't think they were evil, because it does specifically say that the Hylians worshipped these beasts. So I guess that, like you said, they probably served a somewhat similar role as the light spirits in Twilight Princess.
I think that would make sense. One thing that I thought was interesting is that we had the names of the divine beasts in Breath of the Wild. You had Var, Meadow, Ruta, Gridania, and Naboris. And we knew that they were named after ancient sages. And prior to Tears of the Kingdom, it seemed likely that they were kind of callbacks to sages from the era of myth. You got Naboru, Darunia,
Medley,
and Ruto from Ocarina of Time. And then Medley from Wind Waker. Then obviously with Tears of the Kingdom, people thought it would make a lot of sense if these sages had those names, because then you'd have the Sheikah basing their divine beasts on these ancient sages who wear masks that look like the divine beasts. That isn't the case. We have completely different names for these sages. Although there is a really cool naming tradition, it seems, for Age of Imprisonment's names. So it seems that most of the characters, or the new characters, are all named after really ancient things in our world. So I've got some here. I'm sure I'm going to butcher the pronunciation. Yeah, but you've got...
throw some real life lore my way.
Okay, here we go. So Ardi is apparently named after Ardipithecus, an archaic human ancestor. Raffica is after... Here we go. Archaeopteryx lithographica, apparently one of the earliest known ancestors of avian dinosaurs, so birds. Agreston is named after Acasta Gneiss, which is some of the earliest known rocks on Earth, and Kia could be after Mylocunmingia. Mingia? I don't know. The earliest ancestors of fish, basically. And then also you've got Calamo after Calamophyton, which is a genus of tree which formed the earliest known forests. So I've pulled all that from Zelda Wiki, but it's really interesting that the names, because they did seem a bit random, right? But it's quite cool that they're all based after really, it's just kind of driving home that this is very, very, very distant history by the time of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. So everyone's named after really, really old stuff, basically.
I do like that a lot. That's very cool. I don't know. I guess I did expect maybe that these sages were going to be called something close to the divine beasts, and that the divine beasts were basically like an homage to these ancient sages. But I mean, this works too if there were like these, because obviously these hypothetical giant beasts that existed at some point, they don't have to be called exactly what the divine beasts are called. Of course, they could be bastardizations of those words, the same way that they are already bastardizations.
As in, Rudania is Darunia with letters
exactly,
and that sort of thing. Yeah.
So I don't know. It's very interesting. I do like the names. They've grown on me. In the beginning, I was a little bit like, these names are so, but especially now that you have explained that there's a reason, I'm actually curious if it's the same in Japanese. If there's also
I'd be interested to find out.
If there's a similar naming convention there that also calls back to that stuff. Yeah,
because it is a bit mysterious now, where we have the divine beasts named after ancient sages, and I mean, like I said, obviously that they're out of universe. They're named after sages from previous Zelda games, but we know that it's true in universe as well. Like before Urbosa fires Varnaboris, she says, I think she might mention Noburu by name, but either way, she calls back to the namesake of Varnaboris as having existed sometime in Hyrule's history, which. We might as well touch on the timeline placement here. Where do you stand on the whole timeline debate? Because I don't know how much Age of Imprisonment offered to that discussion. There's a few things that you could take as evidence one way or another, which we'll touch on. But overall, I think my general opinion on it remains the same.
Yeah, you're where exactly do you stand with it? You just think that it takes place after everything else, or like timeline convergence, or one of the timeline branches? Or?
For me, it's got to be refounding. Makes the most sense. There's still little bits about that idea that I don't love, but I think you have to. There's at least inconsistencies with that idea, I think. When you mentioned, branches and merger and stuff, as for that, I don't know. I think the general, the point in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom is that they could be at the end of one branch, they could be at the end of all of them. It's so far in the future that it doesn't really matter. And I think you kind of have to consider the same for Rauru's Kingdom of Hyrule. You have to assume that it takes place after the other games, because we know.
Yeah,
I've seen some debate since Age of Imprisonment suggesting that Rauru's Hyrule takes place before Skyward Sword, even. Mainly because
I don't think that's the case. That sounds wrong.
It's mainly because of the Master Sword's absence in that story, I think, and obviously Skyward Sword is very much a game about the creation of the Master Sword. But for me, the problem with that theory is the problem I have with any theory that isn't the refounding. And for those of you that aren't aware of what the refounding theory is, it's that Rauru's Kingdom of Hyrule is not the first, as he says. He believes it to be the first, but it was founded long after another Kingdom of Hyrule, the one we see in older games, has been destroyed and forgotten, and the world's kind of rewilded in kind of a great reset sort of thing, which Breath of the Wild Tears of the Kingdom's director, Hidemaru Fujibayashi, has said. He's kind of posited that idea as one possibility for it. But I think the problem I have with placing this era before Skyward Sword is the same problem I have placing it before Ocarina of Time, which is we know the imprisoning war ends with Ganondorf being imprisoned underground, obviously, and he remains there until the present day, until he's discovered by Link and Zelda before Tears of the Kingdom. And a big part of this seal is Hyrule Castle itself. We know that they built Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom's Hyrule Castle directly over where Ganondorf was sealed as kind of a stopper or a guard to protect this. A cork, exactly. Yeah, to protect this seal. And we know that is definitely the case, not just from like a stone plaque that says it's the case, but also the entire reason that Rauru's seal weakened before Tears of the Kingdom and gloom began seeping out, which led to the investigation into the depths to go and discover him, was that the calamity disturbed Hyrule Castle. And if you look back through the Zelda timeline, Hyrule Castle has not really had a good time. It's kind of been flattened and destroyed and sunk under an ocean, and it's very hard to believe for me that it's the same Hyrule Castle that existed throughout the whole timeline, undisturbed, until it was finally disturbed by the calamity. And that same argument works against the pre-Skyward Sword placement, whereas that game is about an untamed world. There's no Kingdom of Hyrule, fundamentally, but also there's no big mysterious castle like somewhere. You know what I mean? It's very hard to believe that there was a Hyrule before Skyward Sword and there's another castle somewhere protecting Ganondorf's seal. And the only thing to me that makes sense is that all of the games happen, Hyrule is destroyed, then after it's forgotten and all that. The elements like the Triforce have been forgotten, things like that, Master Sword. Then Rauru found another kingdom of Hyrule, and that's the age Zelda travels back to. I think that's the only real explanation that doesn't ask you to kind of retcon massive chunks of the Zelda canon. But what do you think about it?
Yeah. Well, I think it just feels wrong in the sense that would mean that Ganondorf existed before Demise. And that just doesn't fly with me, because Demise is like the root of all evil. Demise is the reason why people like Ganondorf keep coming back and reincarnating. He's the birth of this evil. Obviously, stuff happened before Skyward Sword, and there was already a world down there, and there were ruins, so clearly people lived on the surface before that. Mm-hmm. But the whole idea behind Skyward Sword is that it sets up this entire cycle of Ganondorf, the princess, and the hero. Not just because a lot of people focus on the fact that it's the birth of the Master Sword, which it is. That's one big theme of Skyward Sword, but it's also setting up like the spirit of the hero and the princess, the essence of Hylia that keeps passing down to it sets up the royal family, like why the royal family exists and why they are powerful, why all the princesses have magic powers. And it just feels wrong placing any game before Skyward Sword unless it explicitly removes all the elements that would retcon it in some way,
Yeah. It doesn't make sense pre-Skyward Sword, and I think even placing this era before Ocarina of Time, as many people do, like you said with Tears of the Kingdom Ganondorf predating Demise, I find it really hard to believe that for Ocarina of Time, for Twilight Princess, for Wind Waker, all these games, you had kind of Ganondorf, trying to conquer Hyrule on the surface, while there's another Ganondorf sealed below his feet. It's it's very strange.
That would not make any sense at all. Yeah, and also there's straight up pre-Skyward Sword, Skyward Sword ruins in this Hyrule, in Rauru's Hyrule, that already existed before he was king.
Yes,
like the sealed, or it looks like the sealed temple, but it's the Forgotten Temple. There's the columns, the ancient columns. Then there's a few more like these small, which clearly have Skyward Sword style engravings on it.
Yeah, but I think overall, my opinions on Age of Imprisonment and Tears of the Kingdom's timeline placement hasn't really changed with this game. It's more so that the game coming out has kind of reignited that whole debate. But I don't think this game reveals anything that really changes my perspective on things. I think there's a few little details. Like I've seen I've seen a lot of people mention the fact that Koroks exist in Rauru's Hyrule is evidence of this game taking place after all the others, because of course we know that the Koroks evolved from the Kokiri, basically as a response to the Great Flood. But whether or not you can take that as kind of concrete evidence, I'm not too sure. But I think overall, placing even Age of Imprisonment's story after all the other Zelda games still makes the most sense.
Yeah, I agree. I'm also a bit curious if they will add it to the actual timeline, this game.
Yeah, I hope so, because I mean it's canon as far as anyone's concerned, as far as the developers themselves are concerned. This is a canon entry in the series, which I believe would mark the first non-traditional spin-off. There you go, Zelda game in the canon timeline. Which, I think as long as the game adds to the established lore or whatever, then it absolutely belongs in the timeline. And I wonder if it'll set a precedent for perhaps other developers, working with the Zelda IP, with having the Zelda team overlook the story, to make other kind of canon games.
Yeah, because obviously it wouldn't be the first Zelda game that was developed by a third party to make it to the timeline, because Minish Cap and the Oracle games, those were made by Capcom, obviously supervised by Nintendo, but the same could be said about this game as well.
Exactly.
It was also scripted probably pretty heavily by Nintendo. There was at least quite a bit of involvement of the Zelda team this time,
which I think bodes well for kind of the future of Zelda storytelling, in that I think I know you and I agree, and we're not alone in feeling that Tears of the Kingdom's the main issues with Tears of the Kingdom's story aren't really the narrative itself, which I think Age of Imprisonment shows is a solid story when it's kind of displayed in full. It's more the delivery of the story in Tears of the Kingdom, the execution.
Yeah, the execution.
That was the main problem. But I suppose that it gives me a bit of confidence knowing that the Zelda team were so heavily involved with the story of this game, which is in so many ways kind of like a bandage for Tears of the Kingdom's lore, in that it's like, let's go in and we'll just tell the Age of Imprisoning, the Imprisoning War story in full, and there's a few very conscious attempts to kind of answer gaps in Tears of the Kingdom storytelling. So I think it bodes well in that we can kind of see a definite shift away from the story is kind of an afterthought, which is often the case with Zelda games, whereas this is a very much a game where the story is the forefront of how the game's advertised. They know that the story is the selling point of this for many people. So I think, I don't know, it fills me with some confidence.
Absolutely. I do. That being said, I do hope that this is not going to be like a new thing, where the mainline Zelda games just lack in terms of story depth, and then they just fill it in with a spin-off. Or probably not. I don't expect that's what they're going to do. I think it's more of a case like, oh well, we did it for Breath of the Wild, so we might as well do another Warriors titles for this time for Tears of the Kingdom to fill in that story.
I'd quite like, because I don't know, Twilight Princess doesn't need a big spin-off title to kind of come in and fix its story. Like, I'm very glad we did get it for this game, because like I said, Tears of the Kingdom story did leave a little to be desired in some ways. But yeah, going forward, I'd prefer not to have to play through a Hyrule Warriors game to kind of feel satisfied with the story of a main series Zelda game. But in this particular case, I'm more than happy with how it worked out.
Oh, for sure. This is the best case scenario after what we got with Tears of the Kingdom. Not, like you said, not to say that the narrative itself was bad or anything, but it's more a case of it lacked a lot of the depth that you expect from a Zelda game, which in Breath of the Wild made sense, because Link he has amnesia, so most of he doesn't remember anything. You're experiencing the story through his perspective, and everything that happened before that, it's all memories, and it's his memories. So collecting the memories in Breath of the Wild were not consequential to the events that play out. It's more of like, if you want to know more about what Link actually went through back then, and Hyrule as a whole went through back then you can refresh your memory by collecting these memories. But in Tears of the Kingdom, it didn't work like that. In Tears of the Kingdom, the stuff that happens in the ancient past actually has bearings on everything that happens in the present. You know, like that's how you find out that there's another missing sage, and that Zelda became a dragon, and all that stuff ties into the main story. But there's only so much you can do with these memories. First of all, you cannot put like 40 memories in the game. That's too much. Especially with how big those geoglyphs are. And plus, it was clearly meant to be a game that's more focused on gameplay rather than story, which was the case for Breath of the Wild as well. And I'm a big fan of the way they did it for it. I know not everyone agrees with that, but I was a pretty big fan of how they let the environment speak for itself. And like, it has the most environmental storytelling in any Zelda game to date.
Yes, yeah. Which is why I think Tears of the Kingdom, I said it earlier in the video, but that's definitely where it falls short, in that it doesn't have that luxury, because, it reuses a world which, kind of a big purpose of the world is to tell a story which by the time of Tears of the Kingdom it is kind of irrelevant. It's, there's no the Sky Islands and the Depths, they don't really tell the story of Rauru's Hyrule or the Zonai in anywhere near the level of detail that the ruins left from the Calamity do. Yeah,
because you could literally trace back exactly how the Great Calamity played out. Just by seeing where all the broken down guardians are in the world, you can kind of see.
Exactly, and I know you have done that in detail.
That was really fun to do as well. It's obviously, it was such a big event, the Calamity. Yeah. It's the closest Hyrule has ever gotten to like a permanent downfall where no one survives. Like, obviously Wind Waker is probably a very close second, but at least many people survived, and they all moved to the mountaintops, started living on islands, and then later they found a whole new kingdom on a different, which by the way is another indicator that a kingdom like Hyrule can be refounded.
Yes.
So for me, So for me, the whole idea of Hyrule being this one place in one with one group of people that's always there, that's not really the case. Like, it's fallen many times before, and it always like rises from the ashes again at some point.
Exactly.
So I don't see why that wouldn't be possible with it. I did contemplate for a while, maybe there's like a fourth timeline branch, and that's where Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom reside. Mm-hmm. So it's just a whole new continuity where things were kind of similar as in the regular timeline, but also a bit different, because obviously you do have to ask questions like, why were the secret stones never mentioned before? Like, even in the time of Skyward Sword, shouldn't they already exist in the time of Skyward Sword as well?
Yeah. Yes, because we know Hylia, or the gods, the golden goddesses created them, right? And we know, is it Hylia entrusted them to the Zonai? Is that how Masterworks puts it?
I think it says that Hylia created them and then entrusted them to them. Right, so it's not even the golden goddesses, but Hylia is long gone by the time of, Ocarina of Time, and like her essence lives on through Zelda. So the actual entity Hylia doesn't really exist, at least not as a person, maybe as like a force or something that's still guiding the heroes and the princess in a way.
Yeah.
But she's no longer like an actual entity. I don't know, it's hard to explain because it's, again, very Kami Shinto like in its nature.
Exactly. Yeah.
But that's the same way that Ganondorf is a manifestation of demise and his essence. The same goes for Zelda and Hylia. So for me, that doesn't really make all that much sense either. The whole fourth timeline branch, it does, because how do you explain all the other stuff that happens in the game? Like, the references to the Hero of Time and the Skyward Sword ruins and the Koroks, and it's very difficult. So I don't know, like the way they placed it now, I'm pretty satisfied with that, because we have to.
I think so.
We have to kind of get used to the idea that Hyrule, or just the Zelda chronology in general, it's always split up into eras. And those eras can take place like thousands, who knows how many thousands of years apart.
Yeah.
Like I think just between like Skyward Sword and Minish Cap, there's like eons of time that passed.
Yes.
Beyond that.
Exactly.
So why would it be so unbelievable to say, well, the same thing happened for Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom? Like something happened and Hyrule fell, and at some point it just got refounded again. In this case, by Rauru.
Yeah. I think that makes sense, because I think I think the games are better if you kind of imagine that the older game, that Ocarina of Time and stuff happened in their history. But I think the only game that is absolutely necessary, I think, to set up events in Age of Imprisonment and everything is Skyward Sword. I think it kind of. Because that game, is built to be the bedrock of Zelda canon, and I think, again, I'm not really sure why this idea's kind of had a resurgence post Age of Imprisonment, but the idea that it comes before even that, I think it just kind of it doesn't work in quite a few ways.
No, it just literally ruins the entire established lore from. Like I said, Skyward Sword explains the origin of almost everything that's relevant in this universe. And then suddenly you have a game before that, a Ganondorf who existed before Demise? No.
And we know that Skyward Sword is at least still canon. Obviously there's also the idea that these games kind of they take place in a bit of a reset, reboots and whatever, but we know that the events of Skyward Sword, or at least something very similar, did happen in the history of this world, because we know obviously the Master Sword exists. The Deku Tree even describes it as the work of a goddess.
Yes.
And it still seems to house the spirit of Fi, who we see.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
It plays quite a big role in the story of Breath of the Wild, and also in the story of Age of Imprisonment.
Yeah. Well, like even something like the absence of the Master Sword, you can easily just say, well, it probably did exist in Rauru's time or before Rauru's time, without the time travel stuff, without it being sent back from the future. But like if you look at the adult timeline, for example, the Master Sword disappears, but beneath the ocean there too. And from what we can tell, it never resurfaced. It was always just at the bottom of the ocean. And after that, every other game that takes place after Wind Waker, it's just gone forever, basically.
Yeah, well, the Master Sword being, lost isn't at all unlike it. It's like in obviously in Breath of the Wild, it's in the Korok Forest, but because Zelda put it there. But in both A Link to the Past and Twilight Princess, the Master Sword is in a pedestal in what is essentially the ruins of the Temple of Time, but for all intents and purposes is completely lost to the world until Link finds it.
Yeah.
So I really don't think it's difficult to believe at all that somewhere in a corner of Rauru's world, there's a little forest with a pedestal in it, and there's just this forgotten sword there. I don't think that's difficult to believe at all.
Yeah, it's buried somewhere deep below the earth, the same way that the Forgotten Temple was buried deep below the earth somewhere. And you're dealing with time travel, so you can have multiple instances of the same object reappearing or disappearing again. And you can even... There's even a discussion about the fact that how did the Master Sword end up in the Wind Waker in the first place? Because when Zelda sends Link back in time, the Master Sword goes with him.
Yeah.
So there's a, like, I think Bandit made a video about that back in the day, which was really something I didn't even think about back in the day. But it was like, well, maybe they just forged a new sword. Maybe that's why it was weaker than the one in Ocarina of Time, which never lost its.
It didn't need sages to kind of empower it. Yeah.
So the Master Sword has always been kind of showing up and then disappearing again. So I don't think it's unreasonable to say, like, it probably did exist in Rauru's time, or at least before it, but it got lost to time, and it re-emerged not by uncovering it somewhere, but because of time travel. It came back into... it's a bit like the same closed loop where they send the Purab pad back in time, and that probably inspired the ancient technology that we see later.
Oh, that then ended up with the Sheikah slate, which then inspired the Pura pad. It's like a bootstrap paradox, or like a grandfather paradox.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, the Master Sword in particular, although it doesn't really appear in Age of Imprisonment, a little bit of it has quite a big impact on the story, which I guess we'll cover in the other half of this discussion, because this video is only half of my talk with Monster Maze, and if you'd like to hear us continue to waffle on about Age of Imprisonment's lore, check out the other half over on his channel. There's a link in the description or a card in the top right. Thanks for watching or listening to this video. If you liked it, leave a like, and subscribe if you haven't already for more Zelda content. Cheers guys, and I'll see you next time.